Only child, just found out my dad has been hiding a wife and my 10-year-old half-sister. Hi. As the title suggests, my world has been upended. I, a 25-year-old woman, recently discovered that my father, who is 52, has been hiding a family for the past 14 years. It feels surreal to even type those words. My parents divorced when I was just 9 years old, a tender age when the world already feels confusing and uncertain. At the time, I didn't fully grasp what their separation meant. My dad had moved overseas about a year before their divorce, allegedly for work. It seemed logical then. He was always chasing something: ambition, success, or perhaps just an escape. I didn't find out about the divorce until 3 years later. I was 12, teetering on the edge of adolescence, when my mom, visibly agitated, shared that she had heard my dad had been spotted with a wedding ring on his finger. My mom wasn't one to gossip or jump to conclusions, but the evidence was undeniable. My father had remarried. He hadn't mentioned it to me. Not once. Even now, as I recall those days, a part of me wonders why I didn't ask more questions. But how could I? I was young, overwhelmed, and scared. How do you confront a parent about such a monumental secret when you barely understand what marriage and divorce mean yourself? Despite the secrecy, my father didn't vanish from my life. On the contrary, he was always there, at least in some ways. Every year, like clockwork, he would fly back to celebrate my birthday with me. He would stay for a few weeks, sometimes even a month, filling those fleeting visits with laughter, gifts, and stories about his glamorous life abroad. He called me weekly, never missing a single Sunday call. I still remember his voice, warm and familiar, asking about school, my friends, and later, my aspirations. He wasn't just a voice on the phone, he was present for pivotal moments. When my grandfather, a man I adored, passed away, my father was by my side, holding my hand during the funeral. He cheered me on during my high school and college graduations, his pride evident in his eyes. There was a moment when I was 16, probably one of my happiest memories with him, when he came back to the US just to buy me my first car. It was a sunny day, and I felt like the luckiest girl in the world, driving around town with him as he regaled me with stories of his own teenage adventures. He was there when I was hospitalized for appendicitis, staying by my bedside until I was discharged. How could a man who seemed so devoted harbor such a colossal secret? Our bond wasn't limited to big life events. We even managed to go on family vacations over the years. Sometimes my mother, despite their strained relationship, would tag along. Looking back, I realize now that she did it for me, for the illusion of family unity, even if my dad wasn't particularly thrilled about her presence. Those vacations hold a bittersweet place in my heart, snapshots of fleeting togetherness, a patchwork of what could have been. One of the most vivid memories I have is from my college years. By then, my dad and I had developed a deeper relationship, one built on mutual respect and understanding. He flew me out to Italy for a week, just the two of us. It was magical walking the cobblestone streets of Rome, marveling at the art in Florence, and savoring authentic gelato in Venice. It felt like a rare gift to have his undivided attention. For that week, I forgot about the distance that usually separated us. It was just me and my dad, two travelers discovering the world together. In hindsight, those moments, as beautiful as they were also deceptive. They painted a picture of a man who cared deeply for his daughter, and I clung to that image with all my might. But now, knowing what I know, I question everything. Was he truly the doting father I believed him to be? Or was he merely playing a role designed to keep me from digging too deep into his other life? The revelation that he had been hiding a family for over a decade casts a shadow over those cherished memories. Every phone call, every visit, every shared laugh now feels tinged with a strange kind of betrayal. I can't help but wonder, was there a moment during those times when he almost told me the truth? Or was he so adept at compartmentalizing his life that it never crossed his mind? I suppose part of me always sensed there was more to his story. The long silences when I asked about his life overseas, the vague answers about his work, the way he avoided discussions about his future plans. But I never pushed him. I trusted him. After all, he was my dad, the man who showed up when it mattered, the man who made me feel loved despite the miles between us. But now, with the truth laid bare, I can't help but feel like I've been living in the shadows of his carefully constructed lie. And as I write this, I'm left grappling with the same questions that have haunted me since the day I found out. Who is my father, really? And how could he keep such a monumental secret from me for so long? My mother, steadfast and loyal to a fault, held on to her love for my father all these years. Despite the pain of their divorce and the void left in her life, she never sought solace in the arms of another. She remained unmarried, her life shaped by a quiet resilience and a devotion to me. Her reasoning, though heartbreaking, was rooted in her belief that cultural and familial pressures, particularly those tied to our Middle Eastern and Muslim heritage, had driven my father to seek a better life overseas. She believed he felt an overwhelming need to prove himself, to achieve a level of success that would earn the respect of both his peers and his family. Over the years, I watched her silently reconcile her love for him with his absence. She rarely spoke ill of him, even when she had every reason to. Instead, she would say things like, "Your father had his reasons," or, "He always wanted what was best for us." For a long time, I admired her unwavering faith in him. It comforted me to think that, even if my parents weren't together, there was still love and respect between them. Now, in the aftermath of his revelation, I wonder if she had been living in denial all along, clinging to a romanticized version of a man who had long since moved on. 3 weeks ago, I embarked on a much-anticipated trip to Asia, a chance to immerse myself in a new culture, escape the daily grind, and experience the world. As fate would have it, my itinerary included a layover in the city where my father now lived. It was a brief stop, just a few hours, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to see him. We met at the airport, and for those few precious hours, it was as if the weight of time and distance melted away. We laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed each other's company, just as we always had. Despite everything, my relationship with my father had grown stronger over the years. There was a certain rhythm to our conversations, an ease that came from years of navigating the complexities of our unconventional bond. That layover felt like a small yet meaningful extension of our connection. I told him I would visit him again soon, this time for a longer stay, envisioning a trip where I could experience his life there more fully. It never occurred to me that this promise would set the stage for a life-altering revelation. When I returned home, jet-lagged and already overwhelmed by the chaos of the holiday season, my father dropped an unexpected bombshell. He had flown back to the U.S. to see me, an unannounced visit that, at first, felt like a wonderful surprise. It had been years since he'd made such an effort to see me outside of the planned events. But my initial excitement quickly turned into confusion and disbelief when he sat me down and said, "I need to tell you something." The timing couldn't have been worse. Christmas was right around the corner, work deadlines were looming, and my body was still recovering from the exhaustion of travel. Yet here he was, looking me in the eye with a mixture of guilt and resolve, ready to unravel the life I thought I understood. "There's something I've kept from you," he began, his voice trembling slightly. My heart sank as 100 possibilities raced through my mind. Had he lost his job? Was he sick? The gravity of his expression told me that whatever he was about to say would change everything. As he began to speak, his words came slowly, carefully chosen, each one landing like a punch to the gut. He told me about his other family, the wife he had married 14 years ago, the life he had built overseas, the daughter I never knew I had. At first, I struggled to comprehend what he was saying. My father, the man who had been such a constant, if distant, presence in my life, had been living a life for over a decade. He wasn't just the globe-trotting bachelor I had imagined. He was a husband, a father, a man with a life so vastly different from the one I had been led to believe. He explained that for the first 7 years of his marriage, he lived alone, without his wife. He claimed it was because he had always intended to return to the US, to be closer to me, and didn't want to uproot her life unnecessarily. He told me that his daughter, my half-sister, knew about me, but he had never found the right time to tell me about her. I didn't want to mess you up, he said, as if shielding me from the truth somehow justified the years of deception. I sat there, stunned, as he laid bare the details of his double life. Each revelation felt like another brick being added to the wall that now stood between us. My mind flashed back to our conversations over the years, the moments when I had asked him about his life overseas and he had deflected with vague answers. How could he have kept something so monumental from me for so long? And why now, of all times, did he choose to tell me? The timing of his confession felt almost cruel. I was already grappling with the demands of work, the stress of the holidays, and the lingering exhaustion of my trip. To have this bombshell dropped on me in the midst of it all felt like a betrayal on a whole new level. I couldn't understand why he hadn't told me earlier, why he hadn't trusted me enough to handle the truth. As he finished speaking, I realized I didn't even know how to respond. Anger, sadness, betrayal, they all swirled within me, but I couldn't find the words to express the storm of emotions raging inside. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for understanding, but all I could think about was the years of lies that had led us to this moment. That night, after he left, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the Christmas lights twinkling in the corner. They felt mocking, a stark contrast to the darkness that had settled over me. My father's confession had shattered the foundation of trust I had built with him, leaving me to pick up the pieces and figure out how to move forward. I was utterly blindsided. For years, I had believed my father lived a solitary life overseas, a narrative he never challenged. In our conversations, he would mention his work, the challenges of living abroad, and the people he met along the way, but there was never any indication of a family. No photos, no slips in conversation, no vague allusions to a wife or a child. It was as if this other life didn't exist, or perhaps he had worked so meticulously to keep it hidden that I never even thought to question him. The revelation that he hadn't moved in with his wife until 7 years into their marriage initially struck me as strange. Why would someone marry and then live apart for so long? But as he explained, his reasoning seemed oddly considerate, almost selfless. He claimed that he had always hoped to return to the US, to find a job closer to me, and that uprooting her life would have been unfair if there was a chance he could come back. On the surface, it sounded noble, a man torn between his responsibilities to 2 families. Yet the more I thought about it, the more it felt like a convenient excuse, a way to keep both worlds separate without facing the consequences of his choices. And then there was my sister. My sister. The words felt foreign, like they didn't belong to me. I had spent 25 years believing I was an only child, the sole bearer of my father's legacy. To suddenly learn that I had a sibling, someone who had known about me while I remained oblivious to her existence, was a shock I wasn't prepared for. How many birthdays had she celebrated? How many milestones had she achieved, while I had been none the wiser? Had she ever resented me, the daughter from his other life, who had taken up so much of his time and attention, even from afar? My father tried to justify his silence by saying he had never found the right time to tell me. What is the right time to reveal you've been living a double life? I wanted to scream at him. He insisted that his decision to keep this from me wasn't malicious, that he didn't want to mess me up. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with implication. Was he implying that I was too fragile to handle the truth? Or was he projecting his own guilt, trying to shield himself from the inevitable fallout of his actions? As he spoke, I couldn't help but reflect on all the moments when he could have told me. The times we sat together during his visits, sharing stories and memories, building what I thought was an honest connection. The vacations, the phone calls, the week we spent in Italy. How many opportunities had he let slip by? And why now? Why, after 14 years, did he finally decide to unburden himself? I asked him these questions, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. His answers were maddeningly vague, He told me that he hadn't wanted to disrupt my life, that he had waited until I was mature enough to understand. Mature enough? I thought bitterly. Did he think I would magically stop feeling hurt or betrayed just because I was older? The truth wasn't something that could be softened by timing. It was a wound, deep and raw, that would have cut just as deeply no matter when it was revealed. As he continued to explain, I found myself scrutinizing him in a way I never had before. I looked for cracks in the image I had of him, searching for signs of the man who could have kept such a secret for so long. I thought about the times he had seemed distant, distracted, during our conversations. I remembered the rare moments when he had avoided answering my questions about his life overseas, brushing them off with a laugh or a change of subject. At the time, I had chalked it up to his private nature, his tendency to keep his personal life separate from ours. Now, I realized it had all been part of the elaborate facade he had built. The revelation wasn't just about the lie, it was about the implications of that lie. If my father could hide something this significant from me, what else didn't I know about him? How much of our relationship was built on truth, and how much was carefully curated to maintain the illusion of closeness? The doubts crept in, unrelenting, threatening to dismantle everything I thought I knew about the man who had raised me, however imperfectly. Perhaps the most painful part of it all was the knowledge that his entire side of the family had known the truth. Every aunt, uncle, and cousin, people I had grown up visiting during holidays, who had sent me birthday cards and congratulated me on my achievements, had been complicit in this deception. They had known about my father's other life, his other family, and yet not one of them had ever said a word. Their silence felt like a betrayal, too, as if they had decided I didn't deserve the full story of my own life. In the days that followed, I found myself consumed by questions. What was my sister like? Did she look like me? Did she share any of my quirks or interests? Had my father been a better parent to her than he had been to me? And what about his wife? Did she know about me? Had she resented my existence, or had she accepted it as part of the package when she married him? My father offered to answer my questions, to fill in the gaps in the story he had only just begun to tell. But I wasn't sure I was ready to hear his answers. Part of me wanted to demand the whole truth, to confront the reality of his choices head-on. But another part of me was terrified of what I might learn, terrified that the man I had idolized for so long would be irreparably tarnished in my eyes. For now, all I could do was sit with the weight of his confession, trying to make sense of a world that suddenly felt unrecognizable. I feel deeply betrayed. It's a betrayal that cuts in so many ways, leaving wounds I don't even know how to begin healing. My father didn't abandon me outright. He was there for the milestones, for the important moments that shape a life. But with the exception of those brief weeks each year, he was an absent father. I grew up telling myself he was absent because he had big dreams to chase, a career that demanded his attention in opulent cities, far removed from the mundane life I lived. I told myself he works so hard because he wanted to provide for me, to ensure I had a life of opportunities. I even imagined him as a lonely bachelor, living in bustling cities but yearning for connection with his only child. But now, knowing the truth that he was a family man all along, with a wife and daughter, has shattered those illusions. It's as though I've lost the father I thought I had, and the one that remains is a stranger. How could someone who claimed to love me, who showed up when it mattered most, keep something so monumental hidden? It wasn't just a secret, it was a manipulation, a deliberate withholding of truth that denied me the chance to fully know him or myself. And the knowledge that his entire side of the family was complicit in this deception only deepens the wound. They all knew. Every single one of them. And yet, they said nothing. In the days and weeks since his confession, I've met up with him a couple of times. I've asked questions, trying to piece together the fragments of his hidden life. He answers, but his responses always feel measured, like he's still holding something back. And maybe he is. After so many years of secrecy, I wonder if he even knows how to be fully honest anymore. I still can't fully wrap my head around the fact that he hid this from me for 14 years. 14 years of memories, decisions, and moments that are now tainted by the knowledge that there was another life running parallel to mine, a life I was never allowed to see. I've tried to imagine what it must have been like for him, juggling these two worlds. Did he ever feel guilty as he celebrated my birthdays, knowing that my sister's birthday was likely just as important to him? Did he ever struggle with the weight of the secret, or did he compartmentalize it so thoroughly that it rarely crossed his mind? I wonder if, deep down, he believed he was protecting me. But if that was his intention, he failed spectacularly. Instead of feeling protected, I feel robbed of the chance to fully understand my own family, my own story. The hardest part is figuring out how I want to move forward. I've always prided myself on being someone who values honesty and transparency, someone who believes in the strength of familial bonds. But now, those values feel like they're in direct conflict with the reality of my relationship with my father. Can I forgive him for what he did? Do I even want to? And if I do, what does that forgiveness look like? I've started to think about boundaries, what I'm willing to accept in this new version of our relationship and what I'm not. For one, I know I can't simply sweep this under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. If we're going to move forward, it has to be with honesty at the forefront. No more secrets, no more half-truths. I've told him as much, and he's promised to be transparent with me from now on. But promises feel hollow after years of deception, and I can't help but wonder if he'll ever truly let me into the parts of his life he works so hard to keep hidden. There's also the matter of my sister. I don't know if I'm ready to meet her yet, but the thought of her lingers in the back of my mind. She's an innocent party in all of this, just like I am. I wonder if she's curious about me, if she's ever wanted to reach out but didn't know how. Part of me feels an almost overwhelming urge to connect with her, to bridge the gap between our lives and find some semblance of understanding. But another part of me is afraid of what meeting her might stir up, afraid of confronting the reality of my father's other family. I've also been thinking about my mother. Her unwavering love for my father, even after all these years, now feels like a tragedy. She sacrificed so much for him, clung to the belief that cultural and familial pressures had driven him away, and never allowed herself to move on. I haven't told her the full extent of what I've learned, and I don't know if I ever will. It would break her heart, and she's already endured so much. But part of me wonders if she's always suspected the truth, if she's carried her own burden of secrets for my sake. In moments of quiet, I try to focus on the good memories, the times when my father was there, the times when he made me feel loved and important. I don't want those memories to be overshadowed by the betrayal, but it's hard. Every time I think about him holding my hand at my grandfather's funeral or surprising me with my first car, I'm reminded that there was another life running parallel to ours, a life he chose to keep hidden. I don't know where we go from here. The road ahead feels uncertain, full of potential for both healing and more heartbreak. I want to believe that our relationship can survive this, that we can rebuild trust and find a way to move forward. But I also know that forgiveness is a process, not a destination, and it's one I'm not sure I'm ready to embark on just yet. For now, all I can do is take it one day at a time. Some days, I feel a flicker of hope that maybe, in time, this can become a story of resilience and reconciliation. Other days, the weight of betrayal feels unbearable, and I'm not sure if I'll ever truly be able to forgive him. But one thing is certain, my life will never be the same. The foundation I thought I stood on has been shaken, and I'm left to rebuild, piece by piece, with the truth as my guide. I can only hope that, in the end, I find a way to make peace with the man my father is, not the man I thought he was.